Of any meeting, the chair remind all the members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and inquire as to whether any member knows of any conflict of interest or potential conflict with matters to come before the commission. If any member knows of conflict of interest, please state so as the roll is called. Angela?
Renee Cahoon.
Present, no known conflicts.
Neil Andrew.
Present, no known conflicts.
Larry Baldwin.
Present, no known conflict.
D.R. Bryan.
He's on his way.
Bob Emery.
Present, no conflict.
Jordan Hennessy.
Present, and in interests of avoiding a appearance of a conflict, I'll recuse on the Bogue Banks Beach Management Plan.
Robert High.
Present, no known conflict.
Sheila Holman.
Present, no known conflicts.
Steve King.
Here, no known conflict.
Lauren Soller.
Present, no conflicts.
Steve Shuttleworth. Earl Smith.
Present, no known conflicts.
Robbie Yates. That's 10 at the moment, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Just to make everybody aware, our live streaming today is having some technical difficulties, and it is being worked on, and they do have a notice out for those trying to get on that is, they will be streamed at a later date. Hopefully, they'll get it fixed, maybe by tomorrow anyway. Thank you very much, Christy. Appreciate all your help. I'd like to thank everybody, and thank you for noting the change of venue. We appreciate our host at Tryon Palace accommodating us today. We also would like to welcome our acting attorney, Sarah Zambon. Sarah, welcome, thank you. She's going to be working with us at least for this meeting and maybe into the future. We'll see how it goes. We also would expect another attorney, Deputy Attorney General Phil Reynolds will be coming in later for our closed session. And just to make a note that CRAC did not meet today. They will be meeting at our November meeting, but we thank the members that are here today. Anyway, thank you very much. I'd like to make a couple comments before we get started. I think the coast of North Carolina dodged a bullet last week, a couple more degrees west, and I think we would not, may probably be having this meeting. I'm very appreciative of the fact that we did. I know our CRAC chair, Bobby Outen, is very busy dealing with stuff on Hatteras Island, both in Rodanthe and Buxton, both of whom had lots of damage, especially North Buxton. There's a lot of structural damage to different buildings down there as you enter that. For those of us that made that field trip at our last meeting, some of us, we were talking about that before the meeting, it was probably a pretty provident field trip because the conditions on the ground today are a whole lot different than they were then. So much stuff has been uncovered as well at that old naval site. There's tons of debris that's been uncovered that nobody even knew was there. All right. I think that's it, and we'll move on. Tankard, I'm going to turn it over to you since you have the long report today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to members of the Commission. Good afternoon to members of the Advisory Council, to staff, to guests whenever you're able to see this stream, and to DCM staff. Thanks again to the Tryon Palace History Center for hosting us here in historic New Bern. Commissioners, please make yourselves comfortable. As the Chair said, there's a lot to update you on since the last meeting, so this might take a few minutes. If any questions come to mind, it might be most efficient just to save those till the end, and I can address those at that time. So to start off with the Hurricane Erin report, once again, we witnessed a Atlantic hurricane go from a tropical depression to a major storm, in this case, Category 5 storm with remarkable speed. I think it was about 24 hours, the storm thing went from a depression to a Cat 5. So it seems now like rapid intensification is more the norm than the exception. We're in a different time period, and we have to be prepared. With this storm, we went through our normal preparations, not knowing exactly what the track would be and what the impacts would be. We had to be prepared either way. We did things like make sure our staff were prepared, all briefed, all had their marching orders and procedures in case things did take a turn for the worse. Thankfully, we were spared the catastrophic impacts. We started seeing those impacts when the storm was about 600 miles offshore. The coast started seeing those impacts. The eye, I think, eventually passed about 200 miles offshore. There were a few isolated hotspots where there was damage, particularly in Dare and Hyde counties. 3 days of surge, storm waves, and high tides caused significant beach erosion, structural damage, beach closures, but no house collapses. DOT was forced to close Highway 12 from Pea Island to Hatteras and much of Ocracoke due to overwash flooding, but pavement damage was minimal. And by the way, the trapezoidal sandbags that you all authorized for DOT by the emergency variants, those did their job very well and protected that road from damage. The hardest hit appears to be Buxton, as the chair mentioned, which experienced significant beach erosion and damage to structures along most of their oceanfront. Over 30 homes experienced damage to their stairways, septic systems, HVAC, utilities, and other accessory structures. That was significant enough to require most of these homes to need repairs before they can be reoccupied. Some of these homes already have sandbags. If other owners need sandbags, we'll get those permitted quickly so that the structures have some protection until the beach nourishment project is completed. More petroleum, asbestos contamination, abandoned structures were uncovered at the formerly used defense site in Buxton. The Corps of Engineers is working hard to remediate that area. In non-oceanfront areas, you hardly knew the storm was there. The impacts that did occur mirrored those, apologies, Commissioner King, mirrored those of a regular king tide. Let's hope this is the only hurricane report we have to give this year. On the regulatory side, the application for the Mid-Currituck Bridge remains under review at our office. It was placed on applicant hold by DOT and the Turnpike Authority 2 weeks prior to the June 6th statutory deadline to resolve issues related to SAV impacts and other resources. DCM anticipates that NCTA will take the project off hold within the coming weeks, and we will have about 2 weeks then to issue a final decision on that application. Our DOT reps have issued a number of permits for the replacement of bridges on Joyce Creek in Camden and Currituck counties, US 264 on the Pungo River, and a modification to allow the use of a noise containment structure on the new Alligator River Bridge. Outside of DOT, the major permit staff has authorized modifications for Dare County for dredge work in Hatteras Inlet and to Carteret County to revise the alignment on a large-scale living shoreline. Some of you may recall visiting the Terminal Groin, the new Terminal Groin at Ocean Isle Beach in February of 2023. The beach east of the Groin experienced a period of rapid erosion this summer, jeopardizing structures and leading to a number of accelerated erosion calls for sandbag permits for structures and the road right-of-way. The road was somewhat undermined by Hurricane Erin, and we're working with town representatives to get the area stabilized as quickly as possible. In policy and federal consistency, DCM recently received the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' proposed reissuance of their nationwide permits, including regional conditions. Any changes proposed during the 5-year nationwide permit reissuance process are reviewed by all coastal states through the Coastal Zone Management Act's federal consistency process. The most recently proposed changes were found to be consistent to the maximum extent practicable with North Carolina's approved enforceable policies. In planning and resiliency, the division certified 1 land use plan since April for the town of Leland and 1 land use plan amendment for the city of Havelock. We have 4 of the land use plans in-house for review and certification. Those are Craven County, Pender County, Oak Island, and Ocean Isle Beach. In grant program news, the Public Beach and Coastal Waterfront Access Program just awarded 10 grants, totaling about $2.2 million for the 2025-2026 cycle. Some recently completed access projects include new dune crossovers in Atlantic Beach, Indian Beach, Kill Devil Hills, and Nags Head. ADA improvements were completed in Surf City, including the addition of ADA improvements to the existing parking and facilities, along with the acquisition of an existing parking area at the south end of Topsail Beach. The applications for the 2026-27 grant cycle will open in January of next year. The Resilient Coastal Communities Program, RCCP, this month awarded grants to 32 communities totaling nearly $6 million to strengthen coastal resilience. Of this funding, $1.9 million was provided to support risk assessment and resilience planning and the incorporation of resiliency strategies into local land use plans. The remaining $4+ million was awarded to communities for project engineering, design, construction, and implementation. Funding for these awards is coming from non-recurring state appropriations, and competitive federal grants. Sorry to say that funding is rather low after this $6 million round of awards, but we'll continue to apply for more federal awards so we can continue to provide these important resources to our coastal communities. With funds coming in, the division received about $227,000 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to administer the Boating Infrastructure Grant Program, the BIG program. This was previously administered by Division of Marine Fisheries. The program supports the development of safe, accessible, and environmentally sound boating facilities for transient recreational vessels of 26 feet or longer. Staff are working now to establish the program, become familiar with the federal requirements, and we anticipate accepting new grant applications in the summer of 2026. Eligible activities will include construction, renovation, and maintenance of public and private tie facilities that are open to the public. Now, if the Commission will indulge me briefly, I'd like to stress that while DCM and CAMA are maybe more widely known for our regulatory work, staff take great pride in our non-regulatory programs, such as the grant programs I just discussed. The other side of the orderly development and environmental protection coin is abundant and sustainable access to those resources. Public access grants, building local capacity for long-term resiliency, and a healthy coastal reserve system work hand in hand with balanced permitting to preserve the quality and the way of life that we enjoy here in Eastern North Carolina. I'll get off my soapbox. Speaking of the Coastal Reserve, in May of this year, we hosted the fourth stop on the Discover the Coastal Reserve tour at Masonboro Island, joined by Commissioner and Mrs. Shuttleworth. The tour began with remarks by Secretary Reed Wilson and others, followed by a guided boat tour and a walk on the site's nature trail. Please be on the lookout for an invitation when the next stop is scheduled. We are also celebrating the 40th anniversary of the National Estuarine Research Reserve this year. Reserve summer camps for 1st through 10th graders were well attended this summer at the Rachel Carson Reserve. Favorite activities included field trips and squid dissection, which I've never done. These camps are conducted in partnership with the North Carolina Maritime Museum in Beaufort. The reserve hosted 2 workshops this summer. One was called Teachers on the Estuary in June, and the second was a program called Adaptation Planning for Coastal Communities that was held yesterday in partnership with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. This workshop builds skills for incorporating adaptation strategies into planning processes. Participants at both workshops received continuing education credits. The reserve was selected earlier this year for grant funding for several research projects. One project was a $1 million award for our research coordinator, Justin Ridge, in collaboration with our Coast Training Program coordinator, Whitney Jenkins, and other reserves in the Southeast, titled Drone-Based Analysis of Intertidal Oyster Reef Condition to Enhance Fishery Management in the Southeastern U.S. We received unfortunate word this morning that that grant has been rescinded, has been pulled back by NOAA. I think a lot of us have seen these sorts of trends where things are awarded and then pulled back at the federal level. So unfortunately, that grant is not going forward. We will look for other opportunities to fund that work. Reserve staff will also participate in 3 other funded projects focused on SAV, science utilization, and transferring our popular realtor training program to other states. We had a fantastic group of interns working with the Reserve this summer in Manteo, Beaufort, and Wilmington. Students worked on a range of hands-on research and natural resource management to help inform their future career paths. Thank you to the Friends of the Reserve, the North Carolina Internship Program, and UNCW for their support and partnership on these internships. Turning to staff news, following a series of departures and transitions since the start of this year, I can report that we are close to fully staffed. Obviously, many of our folks are new, but they've hit the ground running and they are learning fast. Here are some of the recent staff changes. Victoria Hampton joined the Elizabeth City office as a new field rep on August 18th. She came to us from the Division of Marine Fisheries, where she worked as a fisheries technician. Austin Turbot joined the Wilmington office in May, coming over from Demler. He has a degree in environmental sciences and previously worked in stormwater compliance in the private sector. He will be covering Western Brunswick County, including Sunset Beach, Ocean Isle Beach, and Charlotte. Jenny Ivek joined the Wilmington office in June, having previously worked for the Division of Marine Fisheries as a tech. She has a master's degree in fishery science and a BS in evolution and ecology. Her territory will be Topsail Island and Pender County. Michelle Priest is a new receptionist in our Morehead City office, providing excellent customer service to the public. We had some losses recently. The Major Permit Program lost Wayne Hall to California on Monday. Wayne was the Assistant Major Permit Coordinator and processed applications coming into Morehead City, Washington, and Elizabeth City. The position is currently open to recruit his replacement. Cole Barrow, who joined us March 24th as a field rep in Morehead City, his last day is today. He is leaving to become the new planning director with the town of Newport. We are thrilled for Cole, and we look forward to working with him in his new capacity. Yvonne Carver, longtime employee, retired from the Elizabeth City office August 1st to enjoy time with her daughter and 3 grandchildren. Yvonne left with 29 years of service, 22 of those being with DCM. She started with DCM in 2003, right before Hurricane Isabel, then later transitioned to a field rep, and we will certainly miss her, but we wish her a happy, loving, and healthy retirement. Madam Chair, this brings us to the budget. On the federal side, I'm happy to report that for the time being, our federal grant has been awarded. As a reminder, our federal funding is about $3.8 million per year. That's about 50% of our annual budget, and it funds 52% of our staff. The federal FY26 budget process is underway. So far, the relevant House and Senate committees have recommended level funding for National Coastal Management grants. We'll continue to track this. I'll speak more to this in a minute, but the General Assembly passed a quote-unquote mini budget earlier this month. We'll be paying attention to future movement on that front when the legislators return to Raleigh later this year. Pursuant to General Statute 143B 279.19, our permit fees went up on July 1st by about 18% in accordance with the Consumer Price Index growth over the previous 2 biennia. Fees for major permits and most general permits are now $474, and minor permit fees have increased to $119. Fees will automatically adjust under the statute every 4 years going forward. Full schedule of fees is available on our website. I'll finish now with the legislative update. House Bill 125, aka Session Law 2025-89, is the mini budget that I mentioned. This bill created the Division of Accountability, Value, and Efficiency, or DAVE. The law requires a report by October 1st on each state agency's use of state funds to execute our powers and duties under the law, and a description of any positions that have been vacant for 6 months or more. DAVE will assess the continued need for the agency and vacant positions within the agency, and can recommend agency dissolution and position eliminations. Although not required, DAVE can request a report annually from any agency, any state agency, until the division itself sunsets on 12/31/2028. We, of course, are working on our contributions for the October 1st report. The mini budget further directs DEQ to achieve a $2.26 million reduction for FY25 and a further $670,000 reduction by FY26 by eliminating vacant positions or shifting them off of state appropriations. This is definitely a challenge given our small size, our low vacancy rate, and an already tight budget. And our priority is to sustain our ability to serve the people and the coast with a professional, well-trained, and motivated staff. House Bill 402, Session Law 2025-82, is limitations on rules with substantial financial costs, aka the North Carolina RAINS Act. This bill introduces new approval requirements for proposed permanent rules based on specified tiers of what's called aggregate financial cost over time. Aggregate financial cost, or AFC, is the monetary cost to all persons affected, not inclusive of any benefits from the rule. The previous substantial economic impact standard was static, and this just meant the cumulative financial impact on all persons affected of at least $1 million in a 12-month period. So here are the thresholds and approval requirements under the RAINS Act. Any proposed permanent rule with an aggregate financial cost of at least $1 million during a 5-year period must be adopted by a vote of at least 3/5 of the members present and voting on the rule. So in this case, with a 13-member board, if all members are present and voting, you would need 8 votes to advance that rule. A proposed permanent rule with an aggregate financial cost of 10 million plus during a 5-year period must be adopted by a unanimous vote of the body present and voting. A proposed permanent rule with an aggregate financial cost of $20 million or more in a 5-year period requires ratification of a bill by the General Assembly to approve the rule, unless that rule is required by federal law or adopted to implement a program delegated to the state by a federal agency. Most of your rules do not obviously meet the 20 million threshold, and it's rare that it even cross the $1 million threshold. We'll continue to work with OSBM on doing the required fiscal analyses. We'll provide these to you as routine, and we will abide by the new requirements under the REINS Act. The REINS Act will also apply to the periodic review and readoption process that Daniel will talk to you about, walk you through later on in this meeting. Senate Bill 472, Session Law 2025-48, is coastal regulatory reform, and it includes 2 bills that I mentioned in my last report that we were tracking. Senate Bill S665, related to permitting for upland basin marinas, and Senate Bill 734, concerning CRC jurisdiction in man-made ditches. These 2 bills were combined and passed in one bill, and both have impacts to the program's permitting jurisdiction under CAMA and the Dredge and Fill Law. Please note that we began implementing these changes once the bill became law on July 2nd, and we are working on a rulemaking package to bring to you to codify the new law. First up, I'll discuss amendments to CAMA and Dredge and Fill, governing your authority in man-made ditches. Man-made ditches are now statutorily defined as constructed, altered, or excavated features used to convey water, including, but not limited to, artificial ponds, culverts, canals, swales, storm channels, minor drainage features, and roadside ditches. In this definition, the term altered does not include the alteration of a natural shoreline, a natural stream, or a natural wetland. And the term excavated does not include submerged lands that have been dredged for the purpose of navigation. The clarifications for these terms, altered and excavated, were very helpful in enabling the division to understand and apply the law. So the Commission may now not designate any man-made ditch meeting this definition as an AEC. Marshlands, as defined in the Dredge and Fill, may now not include any area included in a man-made ditch. So what is a man-made ditch? It's sort of abstract. The best answer for now maybe is you'll know it when you see it. You really have to put your eyes on it to understand. It comes down to the form, the function of that feature. Staff have been reviewing cases together since this law was passed to ensure that we are being consistent in understanding and applying the law and across district offices. When a feature is determined to fit the statutory definition of a man-made ditch, staff will not claim jurisdiction under any AEC category, including public trust or coastal wetlands. The upland basin marinas provisions are a little more complex since the bill amended CAMA, but includes new permitting requirements for both DCM and the Division of Water Resources. The new provisions specifically related to CAMA include a 60-day permitting clock once a project is accepted as complete, which is down from our normal 75-day permitting clock. A single opportunity to request additional information from the applicant that must be made within 30 days of the accepted as complete date. If we do request additional information, that clock will pause and will restart upon the submission of the additional information. Failure of the division to make a permit decision within 60 days will be deemed approval of that application. Marina basins will include all boat storage, which is wet slips, lifts, and dry storage. The marina basin may remove a total area of coastal wetlands that is no more than 5% of the total area of the marina basin waters. The marina basin may impact or remove a total linear footage of coastal wetlands fringe that is no more than 10% of the total existing linear footage of coastal wetlands along the applicant's property. There is no 30-foot buffer requirement along the newly created marina basin shoreline, but the 30-foot buffer will still exist along the property's non-basin shoreline. Stormwater management systems may be installed within the 30-foot buffer. Mitigation or mitigation credits are required for wetland impacts that exceed 125 linear feet of shoreline. If a project meets all of the statutory criteria, it is presumed to have avoided significant adverse impacts to fisheries resources. As mentioned, several provisions in the bill relate to DWQ's responsibilities, and we are coordinating with them on implementation. Madam Chair, a final note before I conclude is to recognize your science panel, led by Chair Laura Moore, for an incredible amount of work and countless hours spent preparing the IHA report that you will see tomorrow. These professionals are invaluable to the state and the Coastal Management Program, and no amount of thanks are enough for their dedicated service. And Madam Chair, that concludes my long report. Apologies for the length. Happy to entertain any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Tancred? Seeing none, Angela, would you recognize that Commissioner Bryan is here? Or do you have any conflicts of interest?
No known conflicts.
Thank you very much. Now that we have everybody here, motion will be needed to approve the minutes of the last CRC meeting, April 30th to May 1st, that was held in Dare County. Do I hear a motion?
I so move.
Motion by Commissioner Baldwin. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? It appears to be unanimous. Thank you. See, I'm glad I saved my comments, most of them for tomorrow, Tancred, so I realized that you'd have a long report today. Next up is a variance. Forgive me if I mispronounce the name. Maria Caruso in Frisco, covered deck in the buffer. Sarah, get you to move over if you would. Christy, we'll start with you. I can see you over there. I can see your head anyway.
I should have worn high heels. All right. Well, good afternoon. For the record, I'm DEQ Assistant General Counsel Christy Goebel. Mr. Reha and Ms. Caruso are here, and Mr. Reha is who I've been working with for the petitioners on this. This variance is related to the 30-foot CAMA buffer and a proposed covered deck and elevator shaft within, proposed to be within the buffer on the property in Frisco. I'm going to invite Elizabeth City District Manager Ron Rinaldi up to run us through the PowerPoint, and then I'll talk to you about facts.
Afternoon, Ron.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Ron Rinaldi. I am the district manager in the Elizabeth City District Office. And I'm going to take you on a journey here through aerial and ground photos. All right, this is a location map here showing the broad area. To the east or the right, you'll see Buxton there. To the extreme west, you'll see Hatteras. This project site is located in Frisco and is centrally located between those two. The site is located within what is known as the Brigands Bay subdivision along man-made canals. And this is a close-up aerial from Dare County's GIS. That's a 2024 aerial there. And these here are 2023 side views from Eagle View. This is the southern side view of the house from the canal. And this would be the western side view of the house, also a 2023 Eagle View image. This is also the side of the house that is the subject of today's variance. From the ground view, this is the northern or the front of the house, looking at it from Blackbeard's Court. And this would be the western side view of the house. And these photos were taken July 30th of this year. And this is a different angle of the western side view of the house. This is the location of the proposed covered porch and the elevator shaft. This is a view looking at the western side of the house from the canal. So you could see exactly where the shoreline is in the coastal wetlands in relation to the proposed development. And this is a close-up of where the elevator shaft and the covered deck will be located, going up the side of the house to the top floor. And this here is a conceptual view of the west elevation, showing the proposed elevator shaft and covered porch. I've highlighted it in yellow to make it easier to see. And this is the view looking from the south side or also the canal side. And this was the overhead site plan for the proposed development. In blue, you could see where the normal water level was located by Yvonne Carver in March of this year. CAMA 30-foot buffer is highlighted in the pinkish red line there. And then in yellow is the proposed elevator and the proposed covered porch. And as measured on this survey, per the scale, would be 12 feet landward of the normal water level. And with that, I will, brings the end of my presentation. I'll leave up the 4 criteria there. Thank you.
Christie, before we get started, Sarah, would you like to give us all a reminder?
Yes, again, I'm Sarah Zambon, and I'm so happy to be with all of you today. Before we get any further, I just want to remind you all, I know you're all aware, but this is a quasi-judicial proceeding. You're acting in your quasi-judicial capacity rather than most of your work, which is more quasi-legislative in nature. The first thing you all need to determine is if you have any conflict of interest in this particular matter, and then that you are able to approach this matter as an unbiased and impartial decision maker to give fair and open-minded consideration to the matter. If you decide that you have an impermissible legal bias, which means a predisposition to decide something a certain way, and your mind is not open to new information, you need to let us know. You must be able to set aside prior knowledge and preconceptions concerning the matter at issue and base your considerations solely upon the evidence in the record. And in this case, largely that's the stipulated facts. Deliberation contemplates a give and take, where CRC members will share their observations and opinions. Each member should enter the deliberation with an open mind, listen to the evidence, share their observations and analysis, and listen to other members' comments. Only after deliberation should any member commit to a vote. If there was a proven actual bias or lack of an impartial tribunal, members could be held individually liable for monetary damage. In my 19 years of experience doing quasi-judicial proceedings, that has never happened. But as your legal counsel, I have to advise you these things. And so if you all have any other questions about quasi-judicial proceedings, I know you've all done this before. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll let Christie get back to it.
Thank you, Sarah. Christie?
Okay. So the petitioners are Charles Reha and Rosemary Caruso. Their property is at 5213 Blackbeard's Court in Frisco. They've owned that property since 1990. Based on the tax card, the platted size of the lot is 7,000 square feet or 0.16 acres in size. Currently developed with a 2-story piling-supported 1416 square foot cottage and associated decking and driveway. The house was constructed in 1990. The one-slip dock and boat lift that we saw, the dock was permitted in 2003 and the lift in 2015. The site is bordered by Blackbeard's Court, the road to the north, a man-made canal tied to Brooks Creek and Pamlico Sound to the south, 5225 Blackbeards owned by the Moyers, and 5201 Blackbeards owned by the Hydums to the east. The waters of the canal and Brooks Creek and Pamlico Sound at this location are classified as SA high-quality waters. They're close to the harvest of shellfish. And the proposed development here is within the estuarine shoreline subcategory of the Coastal Shorelines AEC. On or about January 25th of this year, petitioners initially submitted CAMA minor permit application materials to the Dare County CAMA LPO program. Petitioners proposed the development of a covered porch and 3-story elevator shaft on the southwest corner of the existing home. The elevator would allow for stops on both stories, well, all 3 stories of the existing house. The proposed covered porch is 4 feet by 8.9 feet, and the elevator shaft is 5.8 by 4.9 feet, as shown on the plans. Also shown is that the porch and elevator is approximately 12 feet landward of normal water level. After the initial submissions, the LPO indicated that an updated survey was required, showing counties and CAMA setbacks, along with a cross-section drawing, so that took a little while. Also, as part of the application process, petitioners sent notice of the project to their adjacent riparian owners. The LPO did not receive any objections related to the application. The area of the lot within the CAMA AEC, and I had a typo in the facts, it should read 5,494 square feet. The existing impervious within the AEC are currently at 1,383 square feet, which is 25% of the lot within the AEC. And the proposed impervious surfaces within the AEC are 1,465, which would bring it to 26.6%. On May 2nd of this year, the Dare County LPO denied petitioner's CAMA application because the proposed development is not any of the uses that are allowed in the buffer per your rules at 0209 D10. Petitioners then submitted a variance petition. They noticed their neighbors of the variance request, and DCM has not received any comments from either adjacent riparian owner or anyone else. Petitioners now are seeking a variance from the commission's buffer rules to develop the covered porch and elevator shaft as proposed in their application. Without a variance from the commission, petitioners could find a way to place the elevator in a location landward of the commission's 30-foot buffer area. Petitioner Reha alleges that he is handicapped and cannot access the house by the steps. He alleges that because of the way the floor plans are laid out, this is the only possible location to attach an elevator shaft that's feasible, and that they tried looking for an alternative location that would be out of the 30-foot buffer zone. Unfortunately, we could not find one suitable for all 3 floors. He alleges that the front of the house is not suitable because of the location of the kitchen and stairwell and the existing bathrooms. The entire left half of the house is not suitable, in his opinion, because of the carport on the ground floor. He did indicate that he'd be willing to install gutters around any roof area and direct all additional water to a retention basin outside of the 30-foot buffer. He also stated that he would be agreeable to a stormwater management conditions on the variance. The staff and petitioners agree on the first, third, and fourth factors, but not the second. So on the first factor, while staff acknowledge that there are some places that the proposed elevator shaft could be placed landward and outside of the buffer, staff agree that locating the proposed elevator shaft outside the buffer would require changes to the location of the extensive existing decking and the driveway. Staff do note that the home was constructed before the implementation of the 30-foot buffer rule. Factor 2 is the one we disagree on. While staff agree that the existing layout of the rooms within the house and the location of the existing decking and driveway make placement outside of the buffer more difficult and more expensive, those are not conditions of the property, quote, such as size, location, or topography of the property, which is the statutory language of this factor. Staff acknowledge that based on this standard set by the commission in the small lot exception to the buffer, but that's for placement of a house, so that's not applicable here, but we acknowledge that this would meet the standard of a small lot that the commission has laid out in that rule. Staff also acknowledge that the site was platted before the buffer took effect in 2000, but staff conclude that being a small lot platted before the buffer rules is not a peculiarity of the property, where there are many small lots along the coast platted before the buffer rules took effect. Staff agree that the hardships do not result from actions taken by the petitioner in the third factor. And in the fourth factor, staff agree. Petitioners have proposed the covered porch and elevator shaft within the buffer, approximately 12 feet from the water. However, petitioners have not proposed any engineered stormwater system to mitigate for the additional roofed and impervious coverage area. While that's not required, in past variances, the commission has added conditions to granted variances for an engineered stormwater system to be installed. The quote, standard conditions that the commission has used in the past are included on page 11 of the materials. The commission can consider whether adding similar conditions to address increased stormwater within the buffer and within the coastal shorelines AEC would help the project to meet the spirit, purpose, and intent of the buffer rule, where the development will have limited impacts on stormwater runoff from this proposed additional impervious surface in the buffer. I'll invite Mr. Reha to come up and address you, and then we'll be happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy.
First, I must apologize because I've never done this before. So I guess, committee members, I can't really dispute the facts that we don't meet number 2. I was under the impression that when they referred to the property, they meant the property, the lot, and the house, and used most of my arguments for the way the house is laid out. There's really no other place to locate this elevator that would be accessible, feasible, and cost efficient. If I could get the slide up on the screen that shows the survey, yeah, that's the one. I'm only working with 30% of the house here because of the restriction of the 30-foot setback. You can see that all my air conditioning systems are on what they refer to as HP. The front of the house on the second floor is the entire kitchen. What this drawing doesn't show is that from the porch over to the left wall and towards the back of the house is a staircase that wraps around the house. To put an elevator anywhere else, I would have to go outside of the deck and then not be able to access it from inside of the house, which doesn't really make much sense to me for the amount of money I'm ready to spend on an elevator. I don't have any room to the left side because I only have about 10 feet from the deck to the other property, and I have to be 8 feet off the other property for building, which doesn't give me any room at all over there. The front of the house has 2 bathrooms, the kitchen, and the stairwell. It's kind of impossible to put something in there that would be accessible, especially like under other weather conditions and things like that. So even though it's stipulated that there is room to put an elevator, I'm not sure where it would go. Anything, I guess it's kind of hard to see, but to the bottom of the screen, there's a wood ramp that leads up underneath the house. Here. So the driveway to the wood ramp, the carport, that is not accessible. To the right of the driveway is the septic system. So again, I have restrictions all around the house other than where I located it. And believe me, if I could have found a place to put this elevator that wasn't in the 30-foot setback, I would have gladly done that and probably had it already constructed because I really wouldn't have to be here for a variance. So that in a nutshell. And I can also say that we meet all the county zoning restrictions, including all the setbacks, the lot coverage, CAMA lot coverage, and the topography is essentially flat and matches the rest of the neighborhood. Other than that, I'm looking for some compassion to be able to use the house.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments.
And thank you.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for either Christie or Mr. Reha? Commissioner King?
I'm curious if the question to Mr. Rehab, if you can't put the elevator in, what does that mean for you going forward and doing the house?
I'll probably have to sell the house. I mean, right now, my condition is I can't carry anything up the steps. Since we've initiated this, I've been crawling up the steps hand and feet. I had back surgery on May the 5th and had 8 fusions done. Still recuperating. But I still enjoy the neighborhood and I still want to go fishing down here.
How long have you lived there?
20 years. And this will provide some work for a contractor and the engineer. They both live in the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, DR?
I'd like to understand better the staff's position on number 2, conditions peculiar to the petition. Thanks. I'd like to understand more about the staff's position on number 2, that the conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property, such as location, size, or topography property. I mean, to me, that reads as conditions peculiar to the property, which I consider the location of the water right there at the back. You certainly can't put anything on the back. On the left, you can't do anything because of the setbacks. In the front, you just look kind of odd, and my guess is the homeowner association wouldn't be real happy about that. So, to me, those present peculiarities, and so help me understand why those are not peculiar to the property.
Christie, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. I think the part that staff is looking at is in the statutory fact here. Is the last clause, that such hardships result from conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property such as location, size, or topography. And so this is, a land use kind of, these variance criteria are very similar to those used by boards of adjustment in their land use decisions at the local level and county level. They kind of come from the understanding that you can't write rules for land use that apply in all situations just because property can be so different. And so the variance process allows for some equitable relief in situations where perhaps the regulation doesn't fit to a particular piece of property. And so I think the focus on the fact that size, location, or topography would be some condition that the hardship would have to result from that. And while staff understand that this house was built before the buffer rule was in place and that it is a small lot, we have lots of those across the coast, and so that's not such a unique situation. But I understand that there's different ways to perhaps read and understand that factor that may be different from how staff reads it.
DR?
So am I understanding you to say that such as, means it can, the peculiarity can only be location, size, or topography?
Or another physical condition of conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property. And those seem to, the examples in the statute seem to indicate that it's a physical characteristic of the property.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Robert?
position of the heat pumps, would that be an acceptable location if the heat pumps were not there? As that's behind the 30-foot buffer?
Sure. On that corner of the house, you're dealing with 2 bathrooms downstairs and the kitchen upstairs, and there's no second floor deck to be able to access the upstairs. You'd have to walk all the way around to the back to get in if you had to go. Yeah, it would be difficult. I mean, it would be costly. We'd have to rearrange and redesign the entire kitchen upstairs. I'll probably eliminate both bathrooms downstairs and find another place in the house to install them. That's also where the main sewer line goes out of the house and goes towards, I guess it would be northwest from that corner of the house is where the septic system is. And you can see that at the bottom of the page is the initial part of the septic tank itself. So that's where the pipe accesses the septic system. I don't know how you would redirect something like that, because it's all based on pitch and gravity.
Yeah, and just for the commission, on pages 41 and 42 of your materials are the inside layouts of the first and second floors, if that's helpful.
Yeah, you got that up here too.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If not, entertain a motion on criteria 1, will strict application of the applicable development rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission cause the petitioner unnecessary hardships. If so, the petitioner must identify the hardships, and in this case, both petitioner and staff's position are yes. So is there a motion?
Make a motion to accept both positions.
Motion by Commissioner Hennessy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? All opposed? Appears to be unanimous. Next, criteria 2. Do such hardships result from conditions peculiar to the petitioner's property, such as location, size, or topography of the property? And we've heard that petitioner and staff disagree on this position. Is there a motion? Jordan?
Make a motion to accept the petitioner's position.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by DR. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor? It is unanimous. Next, criteria 3. Do the hardships result from actions taken by the petitioner? Explain. Staff and the petitioners both agree. The answer is no. Is there a motion on criteria 3? Jordan?
Move to accept both positions.
Motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? It is unanimous. And then criteria 4. Will the variance requested by the petitioner, 1, be consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the rules, standards, or orders issued by the commission? 2, secure the public safety and welfare. 3, preserve substantial justice. Staff and petitioner both agree on, the answer is yes.
Move to accept both petitioner and staff's position.
Okay, motion's been seconded. Seconded by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? If not, Lauren? I'm sorry.
Just like to offer a friendly amendment that we would include the stormwater language that is typically used in a buffer variance, which is in the materials.
Accepted.
Does both motioner and seconder have accepted that friendly amendment?
That was what I was going to say.
Okay. All right. Vote on the motion as amended. All in favor? All opposed? That becomes the motion on the floor. All in favor of item 4? It is unanimous. The variance is granted. Thank you very much. Wish you all the best in getting your elevator. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, moving ahead. Daniel, periodic items of rulemaking. Periodic review of existing rules, 15A, NCAC 07A, 07H, 07I, 07J, 07K, 07L, 07M. With remembering that 3 o'clock we'll have public comment. I know. Right.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Daniel.
This presentation, again, is regarding starting the next periodic review process. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history, the rules, and a brief summary. Okay, so to start with a summary and history, prior to 2013, the rules did not expire. They did not go through this process. But in 150B-21.3A now requires that every 10 years review takes place of our rules. In this process, the main goal is to determine whether or not these rules are necessary or unnecessary. And this is determined by the agencies working with the commission to determine whether or not these rules are obsolete, redundant, or otherwise no longer required. If we find a rule through this process to become unnecessary, then that rule will just simply expire. I would like to note, though, that in the Rules Review Commission, if we were to decide a rule is unnecessary, the Rules Review Commission can determine that that rule is necessary. However, they cannot determine if we have a rule declared necessary that it is unnecessary. So the first step is to examine each rule and classify whether or not it's necessary or unnecessary. We have just recently received a report from the Office of Administrative Hearings for us to review 15A NCAC 07A, H, I, J, K, L, and M. And we've also started an annual review process, and during this annual review process, staff has reviewed these rules numerous of times, and we concluded that all these rules that are still within the code are presently necessary. And what we're going to be asking you today is to ask you to approve this first initiation of declaring that these rules are necessary. I do understand that this is short notice, but this is the schedule that the Office of Administrative Hearings have given us. But you do have the option to kick this down the road till November if you needed more time. But to meet the schedule, here's the schedule. You see that we have to either approve these rules today or approve them in November. That way we can start the public comment period in September or December. And then we can potentially have you finally approve these through the when the public comment period is over, potentially on February of 2026, and get that report to OOH in June of 2026, and then the report becomes effective late 2026. Once this process is over, and any rules that were made necessary will now have to go through readoption. And that's basically going through the rulemaking process again, where the Rules Review Commission has a chance to object or find issues with those rules. So I'll stop there. That's a lot of information on this subject, but I just want to give you an update that we're going to begin this process, and that we do need to approve all the rules that are in the code as either necessary or unnecessary at this meeting or in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hennessy?
I haven't gone through the whole list yet, so I would ask that we would wait to November before we take them up to consider that they're necessary. And I'd like to review them, read them, cross-check them, and before I vote on them.
Thank you. Any other? Commissioner Baldwin?
Daniel, could you not read the rules, but just the topics of those rules, what they hit upon?
7A is, you have your rule book? Sorry, we should have had that information for you. Well, I can tell you 7M are our policies, 7K are exemptions, 7J is basically our procedures of how we apply major permits, 7H is off the top of my head, 7H is basically our use standards for docks and piers, bulkheads, and 7A is very simple. I think it's just one rule, more of a policy statement.
Oh.
Okay. Any other questions? Bob?
Question about the schedule. If we delay these to November, how many public hearings and when would they need to be held?
It's just no public hearings, it's just be a public comment period. And that would start, if we were to approve these in November, we would start that public comment period in December of this year. And that would still keep us, would be tight, but would still keep us on schedule to meet the other criteria and dates.
Any thoughts as to Commissioner Hennessy's request?
Judging by the schedule that you presented there on the screen, there is an additional time for the commission to agree or disagree on these being necessary?
Yes, so after the public comment period, we'll come back to you and provide to you what the public comments are. At that time, you can decide, hey, we have decided we don't, receiving these public comments, we have now changed our opinion, and we deem this rule to be unnecessary if we had it deemed as necessary. And then you would have that final approval on that date of June 20th of 2026. So yes, to answer your question, you would have the ability to change.
Okay. All right. Jordan?
Yeah, I'm still would like to read the rules before I vote on something. Also, what is the process to decide something is necessary? Is there like a committee set up that reviews it within DCM? Is it, is there any type of criteria? Who reviews them?
There in the law, it talks about, which I went through, how you determine whether or not it's necessary or unnecessary. Within DCM, we've created an annual review process where staff is looking at them. We handle different sections of different groups, and we work as a team pretty much within the whole policy section and the regulatory section, and then we bring that forward to you.
So is there a policy within DCM how we review these or not?
There's no written policy, no.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Neil?
Chair, it's my opinion that we go ahead and start the public comment period for this, and that will also allow us time concurrently with the public to review these, to see if we also agree with staff on these rules being necessary.
Okay. Is that a motion?
So moved.
Motion second, discussion. I don't believe we're taking anything other than taking it to public comment. It will still have to come back to the commission for action. Lauren?
I mean, what we're doing is we're just approving to take it out to public comment. You aren't saying that you agree or disagree. You're just allowing it to go out to the public.
I would like to clarify that when it goes out to public comment, it's going to go out that the commission at this time feels that these rules are necessary.
But it will still come back to us after public comment is received for further action.
Correct.
So this is not the final, this is the first step.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? One opposed. Thank you. Daniel, you still have the floor. Consideration of adoption of 15A NCAC 07H.0209 urban waterfront.
Okay, again, this is going to require your consideration of adoption of 15A NCAC 07H.0209G urban waterfronts. And just a reminder that the current rules limit new non-water dependent to pile-supported single-story decks and boardwalks that may be roofed but not enclosed. At your August CRC meeting, there was a variance that was granted that allowed for removable plexiglass panels on the covered decks of public waters. And at that time, you asked staff to look at requested rule language to allow for the installation of removable structures.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I can go through the rule amendments if you would like to.
Please.
Okay. So the rule amendments are to reword the existing language describing what types of the enclosures are prohibited and the requirements for an enclosure to be considered non-permanent. The amendments provide new language stating the decks and boardwalks that are enclosed cannot be heated or cooled with permanent or attached conditioning units. The next rule amendments are just basically technical changes to keep the numbers in order. And then lastly, we put in the rule amendment to cross-reference significant adverse impacts with the newly updated rules in 15A NCAC 07H 0208 A7 and A8. We conducted a public hearing on July 8th of 2025. We did receive one written comment that was received from the North Carolina Conservation Network, and they expressed concerns allowing temporary structures to remain in place during storm events and recommend the below addition to the rule, and that non-permanent materials shall be temporarily removed and safely stored when the National Weather Service issues a tropical storm watch, a hurricane watch, or a storm surge watch for geographic areas covering these structures. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Happy to go into more discussion about this written comment or request your approval, consideration for approval of the amendment as written.
Okay, thank you. Questions either on the proposal as submitted or with the comment that was made? Any comments or questions? DR?
Daniel, could you give us an example of when it says no permanent or attached heating or air conditioning? Could you give us an example of what would be temporary or not attached? I mean, something that is permissible?
And John, help me, I'm thinking those propane heaters that you see in restaurants that go out that you can move and turn off, and they're not connected to a system, they're not hardwired, these are something that you can move around, if that makes sense. You know what the example I'm giving?
Okay. Other questions? Neil?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept the adoption of these approved changes.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, Jordan?
So we're accepting what's in yellow here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's it?
Without
Public comment.
without the public comment, yes. It was accepting as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Next is consideration of adoption of 15A NCAC 07H.0508 Jockeys Ridge AEC. Gee, this is a new one.
I mean, I could give a presentation, but
Does anyone have any questions on this one? It seems to have been discussed quite a bit. If there's any questions, please say so. Jordan?
I move to accept it.
Motion's been made, by Commissioner Hennessy, seconded by Commissioner King. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Unanimous. Let's hope it goes through this time. Thank you. Next up is consideration of adoption of 15A NCAC 07H.0309 use standards for ocean hazard area exceptions. Daniel? I'm sorry, Ken. Excuse me, switched over.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission. So today I'll just be going over the rule amendments to 0309B and why the commission is proposing to amend those rules, and also presenting some public comments that have been received on this rule amendment. So just a quick review of why we're here. Currently, your rules in 07H.0309B apply to things that are allowed inside the current setback. And one of those is a small structure exception. So if you cannot meet the current setback, but you can meet those conditions in that 0309B, then you're allowed to a smaller structure, assuming that you meet those conditions. thing is that rule only applies to lots platted prior to June 1 of 1979. And so before the repeal in 2022 of 07H0104, this rule applied to lots platted after June 1 of 1979. And so the significance of that 1979 date is that's when your setback rules first went into effect. So if you were a property owner and you could not meet a setback regardless of when your lot was platted, you had an option available to you. But then after the repeal of the 07H0104, then those platted after June 1 of 79 no longer had an option available to them. So both of those sets of rules were referred to commonly as your small structure exceptions, where they capped the maximum size of the structure at 2,000 square feet. The repealed 0104 did not have a specified footprint restriction, whereas the current rule in 0309B does. And the one key difference too is that 0309B says as long as you can meet that minimum setback of 60 feet, regardless of the erosion rate, you can utilize that exception. Whereas 104 was were required if you could not meet the current setback, but you could meet the setback in place at the time the lot was platted, you could utilize that. So what this amendment does is kind of merge these two rules into one rule. The proposed amendments that the commission has recommended is to remove that June 1 of 1979 date. And so that would open this exception up to any property regardless of when it was platted. And one of the key things to keep in mind is that also is regardless of the erosion rate. If you can meet 60 feet from the vegetation line or pre-project vegetation line, then you qualify potentially for this exception. So again, this would apply to everyone on the oceanfront, and also it would, regardless of what the erosion rate is. You just have to meet that 60-foot minimum setback. And so the commission also proposed to remove the footprint restriction, the 1,000 square feet. And also the commission is increasing the overall size cap to 2,500 and moving away from 2,000 square feet. So a public hearing was scheduled in the Morehead City office on July 8th. Public comment period closed on Friday, August 15th. And so you may have seen that there were a couple of amendments to the memo after your mail-out date. That's because even though the public comment period closed, we still had a couple that came in, and so we just wanted to make sure the commission still received those comments. And those are included in your memo. Of the 7 that we received, 4 support the rule amendments as they are written. And 1 did not support as proposed, but recommends keeping the current size limits and retain potentially a date stipulation to prevent future subdivision of lots in these high hazard areas, as larger and more dense development is concerning in these areas. Another did not support the rule language as proposed, kind of similar to the other, was concerned that more structures in high hazard areas increase storm debris, and suggest that the rule amendments also include conditions to help limit storm debris or require cleanup afterwards. And then one of the comments received did not support and suggest that the current policy in place is inadequate and places even more structures at risk. And those included the details of the comments and any supportive photos or figures that were in there. So should the commission proceed with adoption of these rule amendments, they would then be forwarded to RRC before they would become effective no earlier than November 1st. And so at this time, staff will turn it over to the commission to recommend how to proceed forward.
Thank you, Ken. If you recall, 2 of our previous meetings concerning a variance that this discussion came up as well. That's when it got amended to 2,500 by the commission. And I believe that variance was granted subject to 2,500 square foot in this amendment. So any questions for Ken at this time? No, Larry?
Ken, if there's any changes to the rules, or this rule is amended in any form or fashion, does that start the whole clock and comment period back over again?
So yes, if there are any significant changes to the proposed amendments, then yes, we would have to go back through the public hearing process once more.
Okay. Bob?
One of the comments raised the specter of subdivision of lots enabled by the change in the rule language. Could you explain what that concern was, Ken, for us?
That's kind of challenging because I'd have to kind of go through and identify those lots that this might pertain to. So if you do have lots, and I think it's pointed out kind of along some parts of the Outer Banks where there are some potential that lots could be subdivided. And so, which there might be enough room then to place two 2,500 square foot structures rather than just that one single by relaxing the setback requirement under the current proposed rules. I don't know if that makes sense. So if you have a lot big enough that could be subdivided rather than one structure, you're now potentially setting up a scenario where two structures might go in.
So was there, I guess there was an effective prohibition on subdivision in the previous rule, or in the rule that we're replacing?
Not that I'm aware of.
Jordan?
Move to accept the rule
As presented?
as presented.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Hennessy, seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Further discussion? Any questions? Lauren?
So, am I understanding the subdivision thing right? If you take the date out, they can replat.
I'm not sure things being,
Okay. So am I understanding the subdivision issue correctly? If you take the date out and they replat it, then they can replat it as two. And so now you're creating subdivision. Is that the problem?
if you had a big enough lot, you could subdivide it.
Yeah, okay.
But the secret is a big enough lot to do that. Or unless there's a prohibition in the community zoning that does not allow for subdivision on oceanfront lots.
So it's not really a huge issue, we think?
I'm sure in some communities it might be,
Okay.
because there are some communities that urge as much building as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Bob?
I'll refer this to staff. Does the staff have significant heartburn over the subdivision question that has been raised?
So we've not had that discussion internally, and, I think, with the one commenter suggesting that a date stipulation be in there, it might be that it's more tied to, as of the effective date of this rule, subdivided lots may not utilize this exception. And I think that might have been where the one commenter was going with that retaining a date stipulation, whether it's the June 1, 79, or if it's the effective date of this rule, to potentially say, all right, nothing subdivided after this date could be utilized as exception.
I'm the culprit that put in the 2,500 feet, and so I'm just trying to be sensitive to the comment, and I'm just trying to grasp how big is it just theoretical, or is this something that we're cringing, waiting for the hammer to fall?
Yep, so internally, like I said, we've not had this discussion, and I'm not aware of a scenario where this has been an issue in the past, but whether or not it could become one in the future, that I can't answer.
DR?
It seems to me that it would, probably only would be an issue if you got city sewer also, because it'd be very hard to subdivide two septic tanks in today's world.
That's helpful.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor of the I'm sorry, Larry?
I kind of, the comment, we don't want to encourage higher density in precarious areas for sure, and I think it's a good comment, but then the other side, I said, do we even have the authority to put that kind of rule in there to start dictating what can be subdivided, what cannot be subdivided?
subdivisions can occur even without towns, as long as somebody records a subdivision at the property tax office or the register of deeds, that subdivision is legal. People do it all the time without towns even knowing it. So I have found. Bob?
I think we probably could put in lots platted as of the effective date of this rule, but I'm not suggesting that.
Okay. Nothing else? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Given that we've only have 9 minutes to public comment, everybody get up and stretch their feet for a minute. We'll have a 9-minute recess. everybody could take their seats, we'll get started.
Not yet. There's still time.
This meeting is now back in session. Public comment is now open. We have two people signed up to speak. First is Allison Flynn from the Coastal Federation, and I believe Allison also sent us a letter which I circulated to all the members of the commission yesterday.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
We can,
All
thank
right.
you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Allison Flynn. I serve as a coastal advocate and environmental economist with the North Carolina Coastal Federation. Today, I'm here to comment on the 2023 rule amendments previously proposed by the Coastal Resources Commission regarding septic tank placement along North Carolina's public trust oceanfront. The Federation respectfully urges the Commission to revisit these amendments, which would, 1, clearly require a CAMA permit for replacing existing septic tanks in ocean hazard areas so they are not treated as exempt repairs, and 2, prohibit septic tanks on public trust oceanfront beaches as determined by the Division of Coastal Management. These rules are critical to managing our beaches in a way that safeguard public trust rights, protect public health and safety, and support our coastal economy by maintaining the long-term health of our oceanfront. Today, hundreds of threatened structures, many with multiple septic systems, remain exposed, vulnerable, and at risk of imminent collapse along North Carolina's eroding oceanfront. Just last week, after Hurricane Erin, Dare County reported damage to 81 oceanfront structures between Rodanthe and Buxton. While septic system impacts are still being fully assessed, a precautionary water quality swimming advisory was issued to warn of health risks from swimming near compromised systems due to increased risk of bacterial contamination. Under current rules, property owners often repair or replace septic systems to regain their certificate of occupancy. This enables structures to remain in a vulnerable condition until they are imminently threatened and eventually collapse. The final report from the Interagency Working Group on Threatened Oceanfront Structures recommended clarifying language on when such structures must be relocated or removed. This short-term measure would specifically address situations where eroding oceanfront properties and failing septic systems pose environmental and public health risks from sewage spills and diminished public access to the beach. Previously, the CRC drafted rule changes requiring permits, stricter siting, and clearer standards to keep septic systems off vulnerable oceanfront areas. On March 15th of 2023, the proposed changes were approved for public comment by the Commission and aligns with the state's duty to protect public trust resources for present and future generations. Thank you very much for your commendable efforts and consideration and the opportunity to share our comments. Thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Allison. Next up, Jim Corneliuson from Surf City, Gardena Real Estate. Good afternoon. You can come up to the podium so we can hear you.
What I was going to speak of pertained to the topic of the 25 square foot rule that you did before we went on break.
That's all right. Go ahead and please give us your comments.
Well, I own a lot in North Topsail Beach, and it's dealing with 60-foot setback, and it's all ready to go. It's been staked off by CAMA, flagged. I've got to get past the static line, or the project line, but that 25 square foot rule, I think would take care of my problem too, so I think it's very important that you pass it.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak during public comment? Yes, sir, please come forward. Give us your name, please, and your address. Wait till you get to the podium so we can hear you.
My name is Lincoln Scott. I'm from North Topsail Beach. I'm a small developer, talking about the same subject Jim was discussing on the 2,500 square feet. Just a couple comments. On Topsail Beach, you have to, most of the lots are about 1/10 of an acre to build. The lots that I own are 0.43 acres. And it's put us in kind of an awkward situation in that, you know, I feel like I've done the right things. I've planted plants. I've done everything you're supposed to do. I can't push sand up on the dune to protect the oceanfront lots because they're not issuing permits to do that. I can't put banding and pilings on to band and protect myself. I'm seeing these nuclear bombs rolling in hurricanes, and I'm going through my 3rd hurricane season. And I'd just appreciate it if they would just come to a conclusion. You guys have passed it, I think, on your side, but if the other side could just come to a conclusion, you know, yes, no, maybe, but, and I think North Topsail could probably use the money for renourishment of their beaches, which just would obviously, more houses would give them more money for renourishment. So that's the only thing I really had to say.
All right, thank you very much, appreciate it. Other comments during public comment? Anyone else? If not, public comment is now closed. Greg, the floor is yours. Consideration of approval of fiscal analysis 15A NCAC 07H.2300, general permit for replacement of existing bridges and culverts.
Thank you, ma'am, and afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the commission. Again, for the record, my name is Greg Bodner. I'm the major permit coordinator for the division, and I'm pinch hitting for Kathy Brittingham, who's our project coordinator for DOT, who's been shepherding our bridges and culverts rule amendment through. Since your last meetings, there have been some updates that were required by OSBM. Comments were received that incorporate additional staff costs and benefits for both Division of Coastal Management and DOT. Specific conditions that we had in the original rule amendments that you had looked at under 2305 were restored to the administrative code, so OSBM requested that those rule language be removed from the analysis. And then finally, during that time where we were updating the fiscal analysis, the general statute updating permitting processing fees had gone through and became effective July 1st, therefore updating our fiscal analysis with those required updates. So just to give you a quick review again of 2302, which were the ones that we were proposing now to amend. Had some minor changes to the wording and format in subsection B that included identifying a narrative and then identifying additional information on the applicant's name and address, and then identifying dated plats showing the existed and proposed development. Further in subsection B, there was just some minor changes identifying that the adjacent property owners were riparian. And then in subsection C, we revised to return the permit expiration date back to 2 years, which was a mistake that was made in a prior update to the rule amendment, or to the rule. It went back to our, unfortunately, went back to our original 120 days. So we're proposing then to, again, move that back to the original 2-year expiration date so that the applicant will have that additional time. So the updated fiscal compared the pre-October 2022 version to this update, and we looked at permit numbers, staff time and salary, permit fees that were associated with DOT, local governments, and the public at large. And you can see here that we had approximately 20 to 40 GPs issued to the NCDOT each year. About 5 to 10 of those GPs were issued to local governments, and approximately 5 to 7 of the 2,300 were issued to private property owners. And again, the change in permit fees, the original permit fee that was identified in the original fiscal analysis was $400, so we updated that to the new fiscal analysis at $474. So the updates included some additional requirements that are typical and required elsewhere, while still holding the GP intent to an expedited permit review, and those fees then therefore remain consistent with our schedule. So you can see here the identified results with that changes through the fiscal analysis estimated that DOT would avoid permit fees in the range of about $2,400 to $2,300 per year, plus the associated staff savings of about 72 to 96 hours per year. It avoided permit fees for local governments of about $400 to $800 per year, with a time savings about 12 to 24 hours per year. It would reduce permit fee revenues to the Division of Coastal Management in the range of $2,800 to $4,000 per year, and of the associated staff time for those renewals that were associated with the 120-day versus the 2-year that we were proposing to move back to, of about 42 to 120 hours. And there were negligible savings to private property owners due to the limited number of GPs that we issue to private property owners. So overall, the proposed changes were under those identified thresholds that Tank talked about previously. They did not identify significant fiscal impacts to the applicants. The updates to the expiration timeframe were beneficial, as it allowed the project time to be let and built by DOT, and therefore not requiring those renewals or delays associated with DOT to receive those renewals. And the fiscal analysis with these updates was submitted to OSBM and quickly approved on July 3rd of 2025. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Jordan?
The fiscal analysis is now over a 5-year period, is that right? Or is it 12 months?
So it's both. It's both. So we would look at both standards. Sorry. We would look at both standards if they both now in effect. They didn't rescind the 12-month period. So we look at the 12-month standard substantial, then aggregate over 5 years.
Any other questions? Neil?
Madam Chair, I make a motion we move this to public hearing and notice in the North Carolina Register.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Andrews, seconded by Commissioner Holman. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Ken, welcome back. Consideration of approval of Bogues Banks Beach Management Plan. And before we start, need a motion to recuse Commissioner Hennessy from this discussion. So moved. Is there a second? Seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much.
That was interesting.
All right, Ken, the floor is yours.
PowerPoint is catching up. All right, okay. All right, good afternoon. Again, for the record, my name is Ken Richardson. Before I turn it over to Nicole with Moffitt and Nickel to present the Carteret County Beach Management Plan, I wanted to just kind of provide a background summary of why we're here. I know the commission has heard this before, but sometimes it's good to kind of just refresh memories a little bit too. So setbacks on the oceanfront are measured from one of 3 features, either the vegetation line, the pre-project line, or the measurement line. For the purpose of this discussion, we're going to focus on the vegetation line and the pre-project line and talk about what those are, mainly the pre-project vegetation line. So beach nourishment, that's the primary erosion mitigation tool on the oceanfront. When a pre-project vegetation line is established, those are for projects that place more than 300,000 cubic yards of sediment on a beach. So prior to the start of that project, a pre-project vegetation line, or formerly called the static line, is established. And then setbacks are always going to be measured from that line unless the vegetation line is actually more landward of the pre-project line. And in North Carolina, we've seen a lot of evidence when you do a beach nourishment project and plant vegetation that in time that line the planted vegetation can become considered stable and natural. But the commission has long recognized that planted vegetation is not the same as stable and natural. So it was in 1995, I believe, that the commission put static line or pre-project vegetation line rules in place. The idea behind that was that if that initial project isn't maintained, that eventually erosion will bring it back to pre-project conditions. So early on, with some of the areas in North Carolina that have done an initial project and do regularly maintain that beach, planted vegetation, and then with reduced storm frequency and intensity, actually see the planted vegetation become stable and natural. So in 2009, communities had approached the commission and asked for some regulatory relief. They said, hey, we're being proactive, we're managing our beach, is there anything, any relief that we can get from that static line? Because even if you have that growth of vegetation and it is considered stable and natural, you still have to meet setback from the pre-project vegetation line. And so that led to the static line exception rules, and those became in 2022 the beach management plan rules that you have. And the primary benefits with those, if a community has a CRC approved beach management plan, is you can measure setbacks from the first line of stable natural. However, you still have to be held to that landward-most adjacent neighbor, but you are meeting the setback from the vegetation. Structures that are greater than 5,000 square feet only have to meet a minimum setback of 120 feet or 60 times the erosion rate. And if you have an approved beach management plan, the grandfathering rules apply. You know, currently the grandfathering rules provide, or provisions apply to structures in place when the grandfathering rules went into effect. So the August 11th, or the graduated setback rules went into effect August 11th of, I believe, 2009. So with the beach management plan, there's a significant investment on the town's part to put one of these together, plans together, and then present that to the commission. And so some of the things that the commission is looking for is a review of the beach fill projects that have taken place in the past, a review of maintenance plans. And so what the commission is looking at there is, are the plans sufficient for managing beach erosion? And then also the commission is looking at considering the sediment sources, the financial resources that have been identified to maintain that project for a period no less than 30 years. So the one difference between the old static line exception and the beach management plan rules is that this also requires the town to do a public hearing on their beach management plan and provide those comments to the commission. So at this time, I will turn it over to Nicole with Moffitt and Nichol to present the Carteret County Beach Management Plan, which does cover the towns of Emerald Isle, Pine Knoll Shores, Salter Path, Indian Beach, Atlantic Beach, and part of Fort Macon State Park. And staff have reviewed the plans, and based on our review, it does contain the criteria that the commission is looking for. And so we will be recommending that the commission consider approval, but Nicole will provide the details regarding the plan itself. So let me pull open her presentation.
Angela, would you make sure that microphone's on so everybody can hear, please? Thank you.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, so I'm Nicole Vanderbeck. I'm a coastal engineer with Moffitt and Nichol, and I'm here today on behalf of Carteret County to present their beach management plan. I'm also joined by the Shore Protection Officer in Carteret County, Ryan Davenport. As Ken mentioned, this plan actually applies to several communities along Bogue Banks, Emerald Isle, Pine Knoll Shores, Indian Beach, Salter Path, and Atlantic Beach. This might be the first one that's been heard like this, but when the new beach management plan rules were created, there was some wording that indicated that communities that work together to maintain their beaches could submit one plan rather than 4 separate plans. And so after a discussion with DCM, we decided this was the route for Carteret County to go. Now, each of these towns did have individual static line exceptions starting in 2010 that were renewed in 2015 and 2020. They are set to expire in November of this year, so that's why we're here today with this beach management plan for all of these towns, so that there's no kind of lag when their static line exception expires. So per the guidelines of the beach management plan, I will discuss a summary of beach nourishment history along Bogue Banks, talk about how they monitor their beaches, what their future nourishment plans are, discussion of the borrow area, their financial resources, and then the public involvement process. So here's kind of a graphic showing all the history of nourishment over Bogue Banks. On the right-hand side, the kind of yellows and oranges are Corps of Engineers placement from the dredging of Morehead City Harbor. It's been kind of sporadic in the past, but there is now a dredge material management plan that places the sand from the harbor on Atlantic Beach and Fort Macon every 3 years. On the left-hand side, or the western end of Bogue Banks, there's some small projects by the Corps of Engineers when they dredge the Bogue Inlet AIWW crossing. It's often placed on what we call the point on the western end, not necessarily to a template, but just a place to dispose of the sand. And then the kind of middle part of this graphic are all the county-funded projects that some of them were Section 933, so paying the Corps to place some sand. Others were, post-storm or maintenance projects. So there's a very rich nourishment history in Carteret County. Just a little of the details of some of those projects. So the Corps of Engineers Morehead City Harbor disposal, which started in 1978, basically places sand on Fort Macon and Atlantic Beach. More recently, it's been confined to just the eastern half of Atlantic Beach. The 1986 and 1994 disposals were the ones that triggered the original static line along all of Fort Macon and all but the westernmost 2,500 feet of Atlantic Beach by meeting the greater than 200,000 cubic yards and 50 cubic yards per foot requirements. That project was originally designed with a variable width berm at +10. However, they did see some escarping after that, and they subsequently lowered the berm to +6. The other Corps of Engineers involvement on Bogue Banks is on the western end at the point. These are very small projects, so those actually have not had any static line implications to date. Then in 2001 to 2005, the county did its initial locally funded restoration project in 3 phases. Phase 1 was Indian Beach, Salter Path, and Pine Knoll Shores. Phase 2 was the eastern half of Emerald Isle, and Phase 3 was the western half of Emerald Isle. As far as Phase 1, it did trigger a static line along all of Indian Beach, Salter Path, and Pine Knoll Shores by meeting those initial requirements. And the design was pretty basic, similar to the Corps project with a horizontal berm at +6 and a 1-on-20 offshore slope. Phase 2, which covered the eastern half of Emerald Isle, also triggered a static line by meeting the greater than 200,000 cubic yards and 50 cubic yards per foot triggers. It was also a horizontal berm at +6 and a 1-on-20 offshore slope. And then Phase 3, which was in 2005 along western Emerald Isle, actually did not trigger a static line at the time. The fill density was less than 50 cubic yards per foot. So the western portion of Emerald Isle was without a static line for a while, but similar design at +6 with a 1-on-20 offshore slope. And this one, the sand from this one actually came from the relocation of Bogue Inlet. So after the initial restoration project, there were several renourishments. As I mentioned, there were 2 Corps of Engineers Section 933 projects. And then there were 3 post-storm projects, and what the county often does, just because of the timing of hurricanes, they typically combine post-storm restoration with any maintenance of erosion that occurred before the storm. So, however, the projects were all titled, Post Isabel, Post Ophelia, and Post Irene. And then we get to the most recent nourishment project undertaken by the county. This took place in 3 phases from 2019 to 2021 and was the Post Florence Renourishment Project. The beaches of Carteret County lost about 3.5 million cubic yards of sand from Florence. So in 2019, they did phase 1 in Eastern Emerald Isle and in Indian Beach. There were no additional static line implications with this project. The static line was previously triggered during their initial restoration project. Phase 2 was completed in 2020 along some in Emerald Isle, Salter Path, Pine Knoll Shores, and Atlantic Beach. As a result of this project, that remaining 2,500 feet of western Atlantic Beach that did not have a static line from the core project now triggered a static line, and also a portion of western Emerald Isle that was under that original phase 3 project that did not have a static line now triggered a static line. And the last phase, phase 3, was done in 2021 in western Emerald Isle and in eastern Emerald Isle, and it basically triggered a static line along the remaining portions of western Emerald Isle. So as of 2021, Bogue Banks from Bogue Inlet all the way through Atlantic Beach and Fort Macon all contained a static line. And the design of that project, we did have to rebuild some of the dunes, so there was what we call an incipient dune was rebuilt in front of the primary dune at an elevation from +10 to +14. And then, like the other projects, there was a variable width berm ranging in elevation from +6 to +6.5 with a 1:20 slope down to existing ground. And the dune that was rebuilt was either tied directly into the primary dune or with a small back slope, depending on the situation. So Carteret County has been monitoring their beaches since 2004 after the initial project was constructed. They document the annual and long-term beach morphology with shoreline and volume changes each year. Basically, when they take the monitoring data each year, how we decide what the status of the beaches is we look at nourishment triggers. Now, the Corps of Engineers project on the eastern side of the island doesn't necessarily have a volumetric nourishment trigger. They actually use a 3-year cycle, as I mentioned, as part of their dredge material management plan. The rest of Bogue Banks has been operating under what we call nourishment triggers. Initially, from 2004 to 2014, they had an island-wide nourishment trigger of 225 cubic yards per foot of sand, basically from the peak of the dune out to the offshore bar, or 50% of the fill remaining from the initial project. In 2015, the county started operating under the Bogue Banks Master Beach Nourishment Plan, and the triggers were, some modeling was done, and the triggers were revised to be individual to each reach, and basically the idea behind it was to decide how much volume is needed from the peak of the dune out to the offshore bar in order to withstand what we would call a 25-year storm event. So they wanted equal protection along Bogue Banks, which did not necessarily mean equal sand, but want everybody to have the same protection from a 25-year storm event. So I'm just going to kind of flip through the communities real quick to show how they've been monitoring things. So originally, up until 2014, this is Emerald Isle. They looked at the 225 cubic yards per foot and 50% of fill remaining. They always maintained those triggers. Then starting in 2015, they started following the Master Beach Nourishment Plan, and now there are variable triggers along the different reaches of Emerald Isle that they have been maintaining. Similar for Indian Beach Salter Path, we use the 225 cubic yards per foot up until 2014. And then up until 2024, or up until the present, we've been using 224 cubic yards per foot as the trigger. Pine Knoll Shores, maintaining, used to be monitored in kind of 2 different reaches, Pine Knoll Shores west and east, but once again maintaining the 225 up until 2014, and then the trigger is now 211, and Pine Knoll Shores is all monitored together as one reach. And last but not least, Atlantic Beach. Like I said, the Corps does kind of half of the nourishment of Atlantic Beach, the county maintains the rest, but they maintain the 225 cubic yards per foot. and now the trigger is 254 cubic yards per foot. So with the monitoring and maintenance of their beaches, what are the future plans for Carteret County? So I mentioned this Bogue Banks Master Beach Nourishment Plan. So in addition to the nourishment triggers to protect against a 25-year storm event, this plan actually developed an estimate of how much sand would be needed for Carteret County over the next 50 years. The estimated nourishment cycles, developed the sand sources that would be needed for 50 years, and then they actually in 2018 acquired a 50-year Corps of Engineers and CAMA permits, and then also helped the county do some financial resource planning. So when we developed the 50-year sand need, we used a crystal ball statistics tool in Excel to basically run a bunch of simulations. We looked at background erosion, which is your typical annual erosion, and then we also, just to be conservative, kind of separated out the storms just in case we started to have more storms. So with all that, we also looked at sea level change using the Corps of Engineers curves. And basically what all this added up to is that the 50-year sand need was somewhere in the 46 to 51 million cubic yards over the next 50 years. The plan looked at nourishment cycles. It kind of worked out to be that 3, 6, and 9-year cycles, depending on where you are along the beach, worked. However, it was kind of realized that a 3-year nourishment cycle is not very economical. The mobilization and demobilization is very expensive, and the portions of the beach that needed it weren't necessarily that large. So it was kind of, although for planning purposes, this is how we got the numbers. It was kind of known that the county would probably operate more on a 6 to 9 year cycle, and then the areas that you might have wanted to nourish every 3 years would just get a little bit of extra sand. But that being said, we do look at the monitoring data every year and look at the triggers to determine the exact timing and extents of each nourishment project. As I mentioned, the county acquired the 50-year Corps and CAMA permits in the fall of 2018. We immediately started the post-Florence restoration projects, phases 1, 2, and 3. So those were the first 3 projects under the master plan permit. And we're currently planning the 4th maintenance project for the 26-27 dredging window. In 2024, the annual monitoring data indicated a need to start planning. If we are able to get sand on the beach during the 26-27 dredging window, that would be about 6 to 8 years since the post-Florence renourishment project, depending on location. So it kind of fits within that 6 to 9 year maintenance time frame. And right now the plan is probably around 1 million to 1.5 million cubic yards to replace the erosion that has happened since the post-Florence project completion. And once again, the intent is to probably renourish every 6 to 9 years, and the nourishment triggers will determine the exact timing and quantity and extents. And looking at the borrow areas, when we did the master plan, we took some 2001 data, native beach data that was taken before the Bogue Banks restoration project to ensure that we complied with the state standards. There was a review of the historical Corps of Engineers efforts and county efforts, and then the county also underwent some additional vibrocoring in the ODNDS, area Y and Z, which are some areas off of Emerald Isle, and then in Bogue Inlet. They also looked at how we could use more of the sand from Morehead City Harbor, maybe by paying for what the county calls Delta projects. So instead of the sand going to an offshore disposal site, paying the Corps to actually put it on the beach more often. And then also Bogue Inlet tends to move, and at some point it often causes a threat to the structures on the western end of Bogue Banks. So relocating it back to the center is also a source of sand. So when all was said and done, we identified the potential sand sources, and came up with a volume of about 50 million cubic yards, which for the permitting agencies, the sand need was about 50 million. Here's about 50 million cubic yards. It seemed like the county was going in the right direction with this, and we were able to get a permit for 50-year permit for nourishment. Now, the county does recognize that, you know, it's hard for a dredging company to scrape every grain of sand out of these borrow areas. And sometimes when you're working with inlets, the timing isn't always correct. So they've actually taken a proactive approach and started to expand their potential borrow areas for this plan. So over the past year, they've started looking at this, what we call the Nearshore Berm West. It's currently where the Corps places material from the harbor when they don't place it on Atlantic Beach and Fort Macon. We've done the geological and geophysical data collection, completed the compatibility analysis, and are in the process of doing a permit modification. The good thing about this sand source is it's potentially renewable. Right now, that offshore disposal area is full, and the Corps has had to expand the footprint, but if the county can take some of that sand and put it on the beach, it then frees up space for the Corps to put more sand in there. So they've dumped about 11 million cubic yards of sand in there, and this would be a potentially renewable source if the county kind of removes it and the Corps continues to place in there. Total about 50 million cubic yards, but the county's currently trying to add the Nearshore Berm West, which would be a potentially renewable source to their plan. And financially, basically what it comes down to is with their current occupancy taxes and the local property taxes, the 50-year cost is much less than their current 50-year revenue, so they do have some flexibility for increased costs. Or any economic downturns. The interlocal agreement between the towns and county, though, is really key, requiring them to do whatever is needed to meet the funding needs. And I think the nourishment fund balance right now is about $36 million, or that was probably as of last year. So there's probably at least another $6 million in there now, because as I said, they're kind of gaining about $6 million a year. And now I will take any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Any questions for Nicole? Larry?
Very good presentation. Considering, this is more of a comment more than a question, but renourishment is so crucial to the coast of North Carolina. To me, this plan shows how it can be done right, considering politics, especially political boundaries, to get 4 or 5 political entities to work together to do a common goal is a feat upon itself, but it's definitely has worked out well for the Bug Banks in Carteret County to have the funding and the revenues available. And it's a great template for, I think, other people, communities to work towards on this. But it was a great presentation.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I commend Bug Banks. I wish that Bug Banks plan had been in place a lot earlier, so other counties could have taken advantage of their level of how they planned it. It's a really good plan. Thank you. Good job.
Thanks.
DR?
Is there a mechanism in place to keep the local municipalities from spending this excess money? And how does that work?
Nicole or Ryan
Yeah.
could probably talk to that, but that money is tightly controlled. It
It
has
is.
to go to the beach. I think that's in their original agreement on that, but it cannot be spent anywhere else. It's a fiduciary responsibility. Get thrown in jail, I think, if you spend it anywhere else.
So,
Ryan?
so right now, based on Senate law, our beach fund is capped at 60 million. And if we get to that point, then the Beach Commission as a whole and the county commissioners will work toward not exceeding that cap, but possibly passing the extra monies back to the towns. We haven't got to that point yet, so as all the details have not been hashed out.
Yeah, and it's also important, I mean, there was, I know when this plan was original, it's, people did not live on the beach. Didn't want anything to do with it. They want their tax dollars to go there. So, I mean, it all comes from the beach communities themselves, and so it's ground right back into the renourishment on that.
Anything else? If not, a motion will be needed to approve or deny the Bug Banks Beach Management Plan.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve the plan as presented.
Motion, seconded by Commissioner Emery. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? It is unanimous. Please let Commissioner Hennessy know that that item is done with on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you all very much. I believe we're moving ahead of schedule, which is not a bad thing.
Very good, Chair.
Where is Philip?
I'll text him.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Is there anything you'd like to move from tomorrow?
I'd like to do this closed session first.
How long Gavoni's presentation last tomorrow? What on annual rule?
We got that, we got, we could get Rebecca, we've got room to move some stuff up, I think, after this closed session.
Do you want to do that before closed session and just finish with the closed session?
Yeah, maybe we'll do that, rather than doing something else after the closed session, maybe we'll go, if it's okay with the commission, go ahead and move up something from tomorrow to today, and go ahead and get it done. Philip, we called you, but we're gonna hold you off for a little bit. Rebecca, are you prepared today? I'll see Rebecca. Daniel, how about annual review of rules?
Sure.
We'll go ahead and take you. If you'll look over to tomorrow's agenda, annual review of rules, information update
Says
only.
battery
No,
overload.
no action, just discussion.
All right, annual review, I can't see. Well, good afternoon. This is talking about our annual review of rules process. So General Statute 150B-19.1B directs us and the commission that we shall conduct an annual review of our rules to identify unnecessary, burdensome, and inconsistent rules. However, the periodic review process, which I described earlier, was codified in 2013, requires us to review our rules at least once every 10 years. So there was a little bit of uncertainty of whether or not we were satisfying the original General Statute 150B-19.1 with the periodic review process. So the general statute still remains in effect. So with that being said, there's no statutorily prescribed format of how we review these rules. There's no reporting requirements underneath that general statute of how we conduct this annual review. And it's up to the agency's discretion on how we do and how we conduct this process. So with that being said, we have just recently developed a comprehensive master spreadsheet. You should have a copy of that in your package. And what we did is we looked at each one of our rules. We split them up around with staff. We had 3 or 4 different sections review them, and we went through them looking for compliance with statutory criteria that is in General Statute 150B-19.1, consistency with recently enacted session laws to make sure we are not inconsistent with those session laws. Again, to make sure these are necessary, they're not just burdensome rules, that they're actually required by law, they actually serve a public interest, and that they're clearly written, and they reasonably needed to interpret federal or state law. So I know you got it in your meeting package. This is just a quick screenshot of what we've done. What we basically have done is gone there, and each single rule has been reviewed. We look at it and determine whether or not it's necessary or unnecessary. But at the same time, what we're also doing is even though it might be necessary, there's some rules we say, hey, look, this needs amendments. This isn't clear. We still need the rule, but there's an opportunity here to improve it. So we're also flagging that rule through this process so that when we get to a readoption setup, or when the commission determines, hey, this is a rule that we want to go ahead and amend, it's a necessity to get it going, we'll have that flagged with this process. And to conclude, one other thing we're going to do is General Statute 113A-115C says that the commission shall review our areas of environmental concern at least biannually. So we'll be including this process into this annual review process, and hopefully come November, we'll have an update on our AECs as well, and also have an update on what rules have been flagged for necessary and unnecessary. I'd like to conclude with one statement. This has been beneficial for us with our periodic review process. We use this to help with the periodic reviews, kind of help us out. At the same time, we're checking the box for the general statute. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Jordan?
I just appreciate you putting this together, and I plan to go through it and provide some comments as a follow-up, so after going through it.
Daniel, we've acted on the Jockeys Ridge AEC. We have not acted on other AECs as part of that process. But this will be coming up to readopt those other AECs as well.
That's correct. And one thing that, Tanker and I discussed is that after that canal and ditch process, when I gave the presentation of how these AECs apply, there's some thoughts there that we could maybe clean up that estuarine shoreline, and that we'll be looking into that too.
Okay, good, thank you. Right. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Daniel. I'm glad to know that the 10-year review is good. Sarah, are you ready to do a legal update today?
I'd be happy to. It'll be short.
I think we can go ahead and do your legal update today. Moving on to another agenda item instead of having it tomorrow. All right, Sarah, the floor is yours.
There was a report, I don't see it on here. Is it linked, or was that emailed to us?
That was emailed to you?
Okay, yep.
Can you hear me? If I move my finger, the light goes off, and so I'm just gonna hold it unless there's a problem. So I have, and I'm plenty loud, so I'm anticipating that you all should be able to hear me, and I'll be picked up by the recording. My supervisor, who is here, Philip Reynolds, often tells me I'm very loud, and so I'm anticipating this won't be a problem. As was stated at the beginning of the meeting, I'm Sarah Zambon. I'm happy to be here with all of you today. Just to give you a sense, I know Mary Lucas has very big shoes to fill. She really knew all of the coastal issues as well as knowing all of you, and I know you are all very comfortable working with her. I hope that I can develop a similar relationship with all of you. Just to give you a sense of who I am very quickly, I've been with DOJ for 7 years, doing environmental work, a lot of commission work, a lot of board commissions. In addition to being with this commission today, I'm also counsel to the Sedimentation Control Commission, as well as the Oil and Gas Commission. But in my tenure with DOJ, I've served with several other commissions. Prior to being at DOJ, I was a county attorney for Henderson County, which is out west, where I was the primary land use attorney and zoning attorney for 12 years. So I'm very familiar with all the variance discussion that you all had earlier today. And so with that, I'll do quickly my legal update. It might be a little different than what Mary did. We're still trying to figure out what the best way is. Several other attorneys are taking on several of the other cases that Mary has updated you on before, specifically the DCM cases. So I just wanted to give you a brief update on those, and you can see all those in the information that I provided to you yesterday. And I would like to point you specifically to the final section, 5, which is the third-party hearing requests. Those are third-party hearing requests that have come in since your April-May meeting, that I had worked with your chair to determine. 2 of those were granted, 1 of those was denied. The appeal process on the denied has run and was not appealed. Of the 2 that were granted, 1 petition was filed, the other petition was not. And so that petition is going forward, and the time has run on the other one to be filed. So of those 3, only 1 ended up with a subsequent action. I am not particularly well versed in the other cases because I am not the attorney assigned to them. However, if there's additional detail you would like on any of them, I can get it for you before your next meeting, or we can have the attorney come speak to you or write something up for you. And so again, I did email you all this legal update yesterday, and in it I included the variances that you had voted on at the last meeting, as well as the third-party hearing requests that were done since your last meeting. And that is all I have for the legal update.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you, Sarah, and welcome again.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to go into a closed session to consult with counsel regarding Reddy versus CRC, Carteret County, 24 CVS 1000 pursuant, and Neil's got a motion. Wait a minute.
Madam Chair, I move.
Let's wait, let's clear the room first.